Have you ever stood among the ruins of a forgotten place and felt the weight of its silence? Have you ever heard, not with your ears, but with some deeper, more primal sense, a whisper carried on a wind that has blown across empty courtyards for 1,000 years? There are places on this earth, scars etched into its crust, where the stones themselves seem to cry out, where the very soil is saturated with the memory of a profound and terrible finality. These are not merely abandoned settlements or the gentle casualties of time's indifferent march. They're the graves of entire worlds, civilizations that did not simply fade, but were violently, cosmically extinguished. I am the archivist, and it is my purpose to guide you through these shadowed realms, to brush the dust from shattered thrones and decipher the warnings carved into fallen monoliths. We are taught that history is a linear progression, a steady climb from ignorance to enlightenment. But the legends we shall explore tonight tell a different story. They speak of cyclical doom, of pride that builds towers so high they scrape against the wrath of heaven, and of wisdom that delves so deep it awakens things that should have slept for eternity. These are not tales spun for the fleeting chill of a winter's night. They're the collective nightmares of humanity, ancestral memories of cataclysm that serve as dire prophecies. Tonight, we shall venture forth into 7 such places of desolation. We will walk the sand-choked avenues of a city that challenged paradise, listen for the ghostly bells of a metropolis drowned by its own decadence, and trace the outlines of citadels that fell prey to silence, to reflection, and to the cold, hungry eyes of the stars themselves. This is a journey into the heart of human ambition and its commensurate ruin. It is an inquest into the nature of the abyss, and the chilling discovery that so often the abyss is a mirror. If you, like me, feel the inexorable pull of these forgotten histories, if you find a strange and profound truth in the darkness that lies at the edge of the map, then I invite you to join our community of inquiry. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notifications so that you are never late for our descents into the lore that shaped our deepest fears. We are the keepers of the stories that were meant to be forgotten. As we begin, I ask you to consider, what is the difference between a ruin and a grave? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, for the distinction is one that will haunt our every step. And now, let our journey into the necropolis of worlds begin. Our first destination is a phantom of the desert, a name whispered in the howling of the Sirocco, Iram of the pillars, the Atlantis of the sands. It rises from the shimmering heat haze of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, less a city and more a monument to defiance. Legend does not speak of Iram as a place of simple wealth, but as a deliberate act of cosmic arrogance. It was, the ancient texts tell us, built by a king named Shaddad, who, having heard tales of the paradise promised in the heavens, declared, "I shall build my own paradise on earth." He sought not to emulate the divine, but to render it obsolete. The city that rose from his decree was an impossibility, a fevered dream of architecture. It was said to have pillars of chrysolite and ruby, walls of gold, and gardens where the trees bore pearls and musk instead of fruit. The very dust of its streets was a fine powder of precious metals. This was not a city built by mortal hands alone. King Shaddad, in his hubris, was said to have conscripted the aid of the jinn, binding the spirits of the smokeless fire to his will. They dredged the oceans for jewels and leveled mountains for stone, raising a metropolis that shone with an unnatural, stolen light, a beacon of human pride that cast a shadow all the way to the gates of heaven. Its power was the power of bondage, its beauty a veneer over a core of sacrilege. The narrative of Iram's fall is not one of slow decay, but of instantaneous, absolute judgment. The city, in its perfection, became a testament to mankind's capacity to achieve godhood without grace. King Shaddad, upon its completion, prepared to enter his masterpiece for the first time, to take his throne not as a king of men, but as a rival to the powers that govern the cosmos. It was this final act of supreme arrogance that sealed the city's fate. The very forces of creation, it seems, could not abide such a monument to ego. Let us transport ourselves back to that final, fateful day. A spice merchant named Khalid led his caravan along the frankincense trails, skirting the edges of the great desert. For weeks, his guides had spoken in hushed tones of the new star burning on the southern horizon, a light that was not a star, but a city. Curiosity warred with a deep, instinctual fear. Against the warnings of his elders, he steered his camels toward the glow. After a day's journey, he saw it. Pillars of impossible height and girth tore at the sky, their surfaces glittering with a light so intense it hurt the eyes. The air grew thick with the scent of unearthly blossoms. But as he drew closer, a figure emerged from the rocks, a hermit clad in rags, his eyes wild with terror. "Turn back, son of Adam," the old man rasped, his voice like sand on stone. "The pride of man has ripened, and the harvest is at hand. That is not a city you see, but a beautiful corpse awaiting its burial." Khalid, unnerved, took the hermit's counsel and retreated to a high dune to watch from afar. As the sun began to set, casting long, blood-red shadows from the pillars of Iram, a change occurred. The wind ceased. A silence fell over the desert, so profound was a pressure against the ears. Then, from the horizon, a single cloud appeared. It was not the white of water vapor or the gray of dust, but the deep, bruised purple of a strangling hand. It moved with unnatural speed, not a cloud, but a churning, vertical wall of sand that swallowed the sky. As it struck the city, Khalid heard no roar of a storm, but a single, universe-spanning cry of pure agony, a sound that seemed to come from the city's own stones. When the maelstrom passed, there was nothing. No pillars, no light, no city. Only the endless, rolling dunes, as if Iram of the pillars had never been. The desert had reclaimed its own. The legend of Iram is a powerful allegory for the dangers of materialistic ambition and spiritual vacuity. The city, with its wealth and splendor, represents the zenith of worldly achievement. Yet, it is a hollow achievement, built not in reverence, but in competition with the divine. It symbolizes the belief that humanity can construct its own salvation, its own paradise, through material means alone, ignoring the moral and spiritual foundations upon which any lasting society must be built. The sandstorm is not merely a natural disaster. It is a metaphysical scouring, a force of cosmic justice that erases in creation born of ego. Iram is the ultimate cautionary tale that what is built on pride is built on sand, and the winds of fate will inevitably blow it all away. In our modern age, the tale of Iram echoes with a chilling relevance. We build our own towers of glass and steel, our digital realms and technological utopias, often with a similar disregard for the natural order and the spiritual well-being of humanity. We chase perpetual growth and material accumulation as if they are the sole metrics of success, creating a world of immense superficial beauty that often masks a deep-seated spiritual poverty. The legend persists, with explorers and Bedouin nomads occasionally reporting glimpses of towering ruins that appear and vanish in the heat haze, a mirage with the weight of a memory. It reminds us that our own magnificent civilization, for all its power, remains fragile, and a reckoning can arrive as swiftly and as totally as a desert storm. Iram was not destroyed. It was simply buried. From the dry heat of the desert, we now travel to the damp, salt-sprayed coast of Brittany, to a legend steeped in the cold embrace of the Atlantic. Here we find the submerged city of Ys, a tale of beauty so profound it courted damnation. Unlike Iram, which was built in defiance of the heavens, Ys was a city born of love and magic, a jewel box of Celtic artistry protected from the ravenous sea by a marvel of engineering. It was said to be the most beautiful city in the world, a place of such vibrant life and culture that it seemed a fragment of the fabled otherworld had manifested on earth. King Gradlon, a ruler both wise and pious, had built the city for his beloved daughter, Dahat. As it was constructed on land reclaimed from the ocean, below sea level, Its survival depended entirely on a massive sea gate, a bronze behemoth that held the tides at bay. The single key to this gate was a symbol of royal authority and responsibility, worn at all times around the neck of King Gradlon himself. The city thrived in its protected bubble, a haven of art, music, and prosperity. But its very perfection, its isolation from the harsh realities of the world, became the seed of its undoing. The people of YS, shielded from hardship, grew decadent. Their reverence for the old ways waned, replaced by a voracious appetite for pleasure and novelty. At the heart of this moral decay was the Princess Diet. Beautiful, willful, and utterly enthralled by the city's hedonism, she became the personification of its slide into corruption. She held nightly galas that devolved into orgies, took lovers only to have them cast from the city walls in the morning, and encouraged the worship of pagan idols over the Christian faith of her father. The city of YS, once a beacon of enlightened culture, became a festering wound of indulgence, its laughter growing harsher, its music more frantic. The very air grew heavy with a sense of impending doom, a tension between the pious king and his profane daughter, between the solid gate and the ever-pounding sea. The final night of YS was the crescendo of its long descent into madness. A great storm raged, the waves clawing at the bronze gate like hungry beasts. Inside the city, Dahet was hosting the most lavish festival of her reign. A stranger had appeared in the city that evening, a knight dressed in crimson, whose charisma was both magnetic and terrifying. He charmed Dahet instantly, flattering her vanity and challenging her to ever greater acts of defiance. He was, the legend tells, the devil himself, come to claim the city that had so eagerly offered itself to him. As the night wore on and the wine flowed, the Crimson Knight whispered in Dahet's ear, mocking the piety of her father and the single key that represented his control. A true queen, he hissed, holds the keys to her own kingdom. She does not bow to the fears of an old man, goaded by pride and desire. Dahet crept in her father's chambers as he slept. The storm outside seemed to roar in anticipation. Her hand trembled as she lifted the heavy bronze key from his neck. The metal felt cold, a stark contrast to the feverish heat of her ambition. With her demonic lover at her side, she raced to the ramparts overlooking the gate. Below, the ocean heaved and smashed against the barrier. The wind tore at her hair, whipping it like dark serpents. With a triumphant cry that was swallowed by the gale, she inserted the key and turned the lock. There was a deep, groaning sound, a shudder that ran through the very foundations of the city. Then, with a deafening crash, the gate gave way. The Atlantic, patient for so long, poured in not as a flood, but as a solid, roaring wall of black water. The screams of the revelers were extinguished in an instant. Palaces of marble were pulverized into sand. The only survivor was King Gradlon, awakened by a divine warning and carried to safety on a magical horse. As he fled, he looked back to see Dahet, her face a mask of horror, being consumed by the waves, transformed into a vengeful mermaid, a Mary Morgan, doomed to haunt the sunken ruins of her own folly. The story of YS is a potent sociological metaphor, a parable about the delicate balance between order and chaos, tradition and transgression. The Sea Gate represents the laws, morals, and traditions that protect a society from the destructive forces of its own untamed nature, symbolized by the ocean. King Gradlon is the guardian of this order, while Dahet embodies the seductive, anarchic impulse towards limitless freedom and self-gratification. Her act of opening the gate is the ultimate betrayal of social contract, unleashing the chaos that civilization is built to hold back. The legend teaches that a society that abandons its foundational principles in the pursuit of pleasure will inevitably be consumed by the very chaos it invites. Even today, the legend of YS endures with a powerful resonance. Fishermen off the coast of Dardanelles Bay claim that on stormy nights, they can still hear the tolling of the city's church bells from beneath the waves, a ghostly reminder of a world lost to sin. The story serves as a perennial warning against moral relativism and societal decay, suggesting that there are consequences for abandoning the structures that provide meaning and stability, however restrictive they may seem. In an age of rapid social change and the questioning of all traditional values, the tolling bells of YS ask a disquieting question. Have we, in our own way, stolen the key and begun to turn the lock? We now leave the solid ground of established folklore and venture into the tangled, humid maze of the Amazon rainforest, and into a mystery that blurs the line between ancient legend and modern conspiracy. Here we seek the lost city of Akakur, a subterranean metropolis said to be the home of an ancient, technologically advanced civilization known as the Ugamongulala. This is not a tale of divine wrath, but of a persistent, hidden power, a civilization that watches our own with ancient, alien eyes. The legend of Akur entered the modern world primarily through the testimony of a single man, a German-Brazilian guide named Teotihuacán, who claimed to be a chieftain of the Ugamongulala. He described a civilization of immense antiquity, founded by shining gods, who came from the sky thousands of years ago. Akakur and its sister cities were vast underground complexes containing chronicles of Earth's history, powerful technologies, and sleeping giants who await a future cataclysm. The city is guarded by a fierce, reclusive tribe and hidden within a jungle so vast and impenetrable that it has remained undiscovered for millennia. The power of Akakur is not in its overt actions, but in its secrecy, its silent persistence in the heart of the world's largest wilderness. The origin of the story is as mysterious as the city itself. It is a modern myth, born in the 1970s, lacking the deep roots of Iram or YS. Its power comes from its plausibility, however faint. The Amazon remains one of the last, truly unexplored regions on Earth. Who is to say what secrets lie beneath its canopy? The narrative of Akakur plays on our fascination with lost worlds and ancient astronauts, the belief that our own history is incomplete and that a deeper, more profound truth is being hidden from us. The story's source, Teotihuacán, is himself an enigma, a charismatic storyteller or the last emissary of a forgotten people. The tale takes a dark and concrete turn with the involvement of the German journalist Karl Brugger. In 1976, Brugger published The Chronicle of Akakur, a book based on extensive interviews with Teotihuacán. The story was sensational, a blend of ethnographic detail and science fiction fantasy. Brugger was captivated and perhaps convinced. He became obsessed with mounting an expedition to find the lost city, to prove that Nara's incredible story was true. His life became consumed by the legend. He poured his resources into the project, corresponding with adventurers and planning his route into the unforgiving jungle. But the city of Akakur exerts a strange, malevolent gravity on those who seek it. It promises knowledge, but delivers only doom. In the years following his book's publication, several adventurers who associated with Teotihuacán and sought Akakur vanished without a trace in the jungle. Brugger himself, despite the growing danger, pressed on. On the evening of January 3, 1984, as he walked with a friend on a busy street in Rio de Janeiro, a lone assailant approached him, fired a single shot, and vanished into the crowd. Karl Brugger died on the pavement, his quest forever unfinished. The murder was never solved. No motive was ever firmly established. Was it a simple street crime, a tragic coincidence? Or was it the long, silent reach of Akakur's guardians, silencing a man who knew too much, who came too close to revealing a secret the world was not ready for? The legend of Akakur functions as a powerful metaphor for the perils of obsession and the seduction of secret knowledge. Unlike our previous examples, the city itself remains an unseen antagonist. Its horror is psychological. It represents the ultimate conspiracy, the gnawing possibility that a greater power is operating just beyond our perception. Karl Brugger's fate is a cautionary tale about the human desire to penetrate the world's last mysteries. The story suggests that some knowledge is forbidden not by gods, but by guardians who understand its power to destabilize our reality. The jungle, in this context, is not just a physical place, but a symbol of the vast, untamed wilderness of the unknown, a place that does not yield its secrets easily and often claims the lives of those who pry too deeply. The mystery of ALTARS continues to this day. Teotihuacán, later investigated and accused of being a fraud, remains a figure of intense debate. Yet, the story he told has taken on a life of its own, a modern myth that speaks to our anxieties about the hidden places of the world and the hidden histories of our species. It reminds us that even in our age of satellite imagery and global connectivity, the world is not yet fully mapped or fully known. ALTARS is the blank space on the map made terrifying, a symbol of the profound and potentially lethal secrets that nature can still conceal. It warns that the pursuit of truth, when it becomes an obsession, can lead not to enlightenment, but to a shallow grave in a foreign land. From the tangible dangers of the jungle, we now journey inward, to a place of conceptual terror. We seek the city of perpetual silence, a ruin known in the apocryphal scrolls of desert mystics as ALTARS. This city was not destroyed by sand or sea or the assassins of a hidden power. It was annihilated by an idea. It was a civilization built upon a single, terrifyingly absolute principle. That sound itself was a corruption, a flaw in the fabric of creation, and that the only true form of worship was absolute, unbroken silence. The city of ALTARS was, by design, an architectural masterpiece of sound dampening. Its streets were paved with a mixture of sand and felted wool. Its buildings were curved and angled to deflect and absorb echoes, their walls constructed from a porous, sound-deadening stone. The inhabitants communicated through an elegant, complex language of hand gestures and facial expressions. Doors did not creak. They swung on perfectly balanced, oiled hinges. Footsteps made no sound. The only noise was the whisper of the wind, which the city's high walls were designed to minimize into a faint, almost imperceptible sigh. The entity they worshipped was not a god with a name or face, but a presence they called the Great Stillness, a cosmic void whose sanctity was violated by any vibration. Their existence was a constant, meditative effort to avoid giving offense to this silent, listening emptiness. This extreme philosophy originated with a prophet ascetic who taught that the primordial chaos from which the world was born was a cacophony, and that the act of creation was the act of imposing order and silence upon it. Every spoken word, every laugh, every cry was a regression, a small act of cosmic treason that nudged the universe back towards that initial, screaming chaos. The people of ALTARS were thus not merely quiet. They were guardians, priests holding back the tide of entropy with their discipline. Their society was rigid, orderly, and profoundly, deeply unsettling. The undoing of this silent world came not from an invading army or a natural disaster, but from the one thing it could not control, the innocence of a child. A young girl, born with a profound deafness, could not comprehend the city's foundational taboo. For her, the world had always been silent. The gestures and looks of fear from her parents when she would accidentally knock something over were mystery. She lived in a world without the concept of sound. One afternoon, while playing in a secluded courtyard with a set of smooth river stones, she discovered a new game. She found that if she struck one stone against another, it produced a fascinating, tactile vibration she could feel through her hands. Again and again she did it, enthralled by the sensation. Then, with a particularly enthusiastic motion, she brought two sharp-edged flints together. The result was not the dull thud of the river stones, but a single, sharp, piercing clack. The sound, unremarkable in our world, was an event of apocalyptic significance in ALTARS. For an instant, the entire city froze. It was the first true sound many had heard in their lives, a violation of such magnitude that it was physically painful. But the horror came not from the citizens, but from the air itself. The great stillness, the silent God the city had so long revered, had been provoked. And its response was not a roar, but its opposite, A wave of absolute, metaphysical silence radiated from the courtyard. It was a pressure, a force that negated vibration at a molecular level. The clack of the stones was not just silenced, it was unmade. The wave expanded, and anything it touched, stone, cloth, flesh, simply ceased to be. Buildings, people, the very ground they stood on, collapsed into a fine, gray, utterly inert dust. The city was not destroyed. It was erased, its atomic structure undone by the power of perfect negation. All that remained was the silence it had so cherished, now eternal and absolute. The city of perpetual silence is a chilling psychological allegory. It explores the inherent dangers of extremism and the suppression of a fundamental aspect of life. Sound, in this legend, represents more than just noise. It symbolizes expression, emotion, spontaneity, and the messy, chaotic, vibrant nature of existence. By attempting to eliminate it entirely, the people of Alsamt sought a form of purity that was fundamentally inhuman. Their society, in its quest for perfect order, became brittle and fragile. The innocent act of the child represents the irrepressible nature of life itself, which will always, eventually, make a sound. The city's destruction is a metaphor for the psychological collapse that occurs when repression is taken to its absolute limit. The backlash is not a return to chaos, but a complete and total annihilation, a descent into a state of nothingness worse than the chaos it feared. The ruins of Alsamt, the legend says, still stand in a hidden valley, perfectly preserved yet made of a strange, dust-like substance. Travelers who stumble upon it report a supernatural quiet, a place where their own heartbeats seem muffled and a scream would produce no sound at all. The legend of the Silent City serves as a powerful cautionary tale for our own age. It warns against the allure of ideological purity, the danger of creating systems so rigid that they cannot tolerate a single dissenting note. It speaks to the fear of social media pylons, where a single misstep can lead to total erasure, and to any philosophy that demands the sacrifice of our essential humanity for a cold, sterile perfection. Alsamt reminds us that a world without noise is a world without life. We now return to the shores of the Mediterranean, to a place where recorded history and terrifying myth collide with the force of a tidal wave. We journey to ancient Greece, to the city of Helike in Achaea. This was no mythical phantom like Iram, but a real and powerful polis, a leader of the Achaean League, a cultural and religious center for centuries. Its destruction was not a matter of folklore alone. It was a documented historical event that so horrified the ancient world it became an immediate and enduring legend, a testament to the awesome and terrifying power of the gods. Helike's prominence was intrinsically linked to its role as a center for the worship of Poseidon, the great god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses. The city housed a magnificent temple and sanctuary dedicated to the deity, and its people were known as the keepers of his most sacred rites. Pilgrims came from all over the Hellenic world to worship at its altar. The city's identity was that of the favored children of the Earth Shaker. This close relationship with such a volatile and powerful god was both the source of their prestige and the seed of their utter annihilation. Their power was not their own. It was borrowed from a cosmic force that demanded unwavering respect. The origin of Helike's doom, as recounted by ancient writers like Pausanias and Aelian, was an act of profound hubris rooted in religious jealousy. A group of colonists from Ionia, who were setting out to found a new city, sent envoys to Helike requesting a copy of the famed statue of Poseidon from their temple, or, at the very least, plans and artisans to help them build their own sanctuary. It was a standard and respectful request between Hellenic peoples. But the leaders of Helike, arrogant in their position as Poseidon's chosen, refused. They would not share the blessings or the symbols of their patron god. They jealously guarded their divine connection, turning a request for spiritual brotherhood into an occasion for insult. This act of impiety, this refusal to honor their god by spreading his worship, was seen as a direct affront to Poseidon himself. Let us stand on the shores of the Corinthian Gulf on that fateful winter night in 373 before the Common Era. For several days, strange portents had troubled the region. The natural world seemed to sense the impending disaster. Alien wrote that the city's animals were the first to know. Masses of snakes, weasels, mice, and other creatures that burrow in the earth were seen abandoning the city, streaming out into the countryside in a silent, panicked exodus. The people of Helike watched, confused but unheeding. That night, the sky was clear and cold. A profound tremor shook the ground, not the familiar rattling of a minor quake, but a deep, sickening lurch, as if the bedrock of the world had come loose. In an instant, the mighty city of Helike, its grand temples and bustling agoras, was leveled. But the earth shaker was not finished. A second, even greater cataclysm followed. The sea itself drew back from the shore, exposing the seabed in an eerie, silent vacuum. Then it returned. A colossal tsunami, a mountain of black water, rose from the gulf and fell upon the shattered ruins. It did not just flood the city, it swallowed a whole. The wave was so immense that it washed over the rubble and plunged inland, scouring the earth. When the dawn broke, there was nothing. Where the great city of Helike had stood, there was only the calm, gray surface of a new lagoon. 10 Spartan ships anchored in the harbor were dragged down with it. A rescue party that arrived the next day found no survivors, no bodies, nothing but the sea lapping at a newly formed coastline. The city had vanished from the face of the earth in a single night. Helike's destruction is one of history's starkest warnings about the power of the natural world and the folly of human arrogance. The story became a philosophical touchstone for the ancients, a demonstration of divine retribution that was both swift and absolute. Unlike the more allegorical tales, this was real. The symbolism is direct and terrifying. The forces of nature, personified as the gods, are not to be trifled with. They give prosperity, but they demand humility in return. Helike's sin was to believe that their favored status made them owners of the divine, rather than its custodians. The earthquake and tsunami were a physical manifestation of Poseidon's rage, a literal scouring of his ungrateful supplicants from the world. It is a legend about the precariousness of civilization itself, a reminder that our cities are built upon a thin, fragile crust, and that the powers that seethe beneath it are ancient, indifferent, and unimaginably powerful. For centuries, the story of Helike was just that, a story, a historical anecdote. Fishermen reported occasionally snagging their nets on the submerged ruins, and the bronze trident of Poseidon's statue was said to be visible just beneath the waves for generations. But the city itself was lost. Then, in the late 1980s, archaeologists began a systematic search, and in 2001, they found it, buried under layers of silt and river sediment. Not in the sea, but several hundred meters inland, lay the ruins of the lost city. The legend was true. This discovery transforms Helike from a myth into a chillingly relevant historical event. It serves as a potent metaphor for our own relationship with the environment. As we face rising sea levels and increasingly violent weather patterns, the fate of Helike is a ghost from the past, warning us that the natural world does not negotiate. It acts. The rediscovered ruins are not just an archaeological site. They are a prophecy written in stone and mud. Our penultimate descent takes us to the volcanic highlands of ancient Mexico, into the shadow of a civilization that fell victim not to the gods or the elements, but to the treacherous landscape of the self. We seek the Obsidian City, a place known in fragmented codices as Teotihuacán, the Dark House of God. This was a city dedicated to the worship of Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, the capricious, all-seeing god of night, sorcery, and conflict. And like their patron deity, the city was a place of dazzling, dangerous reflection. The city was an architectural marvel and a psychological trap. It was constructed almost entirely from obsidian, the black volcanic glass that the Mesoamerican peoples held sacred. Its pyramids were sheathed in perfectly polished slabs of the material, its plazas were paved with it, and even the walls of its homes were inlaid with it. The effect would have been dizzying. To walk through Teotihuacán was to be constantly confronted by your own dark, distorted reflection. Every street was a hall of mirrors, every building a fractured portrait of the self. The entity that haunted this place was not a monster of flesh, but the god Teotihuacán himself, whose essence was embodied in the city's very fabric. His power was the power of psychological intrusion. He revealed the hidden corruption, the secret fears, and the latent monstrosity within the hearts of all who lived there. The founders of the city were a sect of Toltec seer priests who believed they could achieve ultimate enlightenment by mastering the art of scrying. They sought to live within the smoking mirror itself, to immerse themselves so completely in its reflective power that the veil between past, present, and future would dissolve. They believed that by constantly observing their own reflections, they could purify themselves, stripping away all illusion and deceit until only the essential truth of their being remained. It was a noble, if terrifyingly misguided, spiritual experiment. They sought to conquer the self by staring it into submission. The city's downfall is told through the story of a young acolyte named Mixcoatl, who was chosen for the ultimate rite of divination. He was to enter the sanctum sanctorum at the peak of the Great Pyramid and stare into the heart of the city's power. A single, flawless disk of obsidian, the navel of the world, said to be the physical eye of Teotihuacán. For 3 days and 3 nights, he was to gaze into its depths, seeking a vision that would guide the city for the next generation. As he began his vigil, the polished surface at first showed him nothing but his own tired face. But as the hours bled into one another, the mirror began to change. It did not show him the future of his people. It showed him the truth of them. He saw the high priest, a man he revered, stealing offerings from the poor. He saw the city's greatest warrior, a paragon of courage, weeping in fear in the dark. He saw his own parents, their faces twisted with a secret resentment for his priestly calling. Then, the mirror turned on him. It showed him not who he was, but all the people he could become: a cackling madman, a blood-soaked tyrant, a groveling coward. Every potential, every dark impulse lurking in the recesses of his soul was given form and paraded before him. He saw his own capacity for monstrousness, and it broke him. On the dawn of the 3rd day, the high priest entered the chamber to find Mixcoatl screaming, clawing at his own eyes. "It is a lie!" he shrieked, his voice echoing through the silent pyramid. The smoking mirror shows us only the filth in our hearts. Our God is a tormentor, not a guide. His blasphemy, screamed in the very eye of the god, was the final transgression. A low, resonant hum began to emanate from the obsidian disk. Throughout the city, every reflective surface began to glow with a faint, oily light. The dark, glassy images of the city's inhabitants, the reflections walking alongside them in the streets, staring back at them from the walls of their homes, stopped mimicking their movements. They turned, their faces blank and empty, and reached out. A collective scream rose from the city as people were seized by their own mirror selves, their own hidden darkness given substance. They were not killed, but absorbed, pulled through the cold, glassy surfaces into an eternal prison within the mirror world. When the light faded, the city of Teotihuacán was perfect, pristine, and utterly empty. Its only inhabitants were the silent, screaming phantoms trapped forever behind the glass, a permanent audience to their own damnation. The Obsidian City is a profound metaphor for the dangers of unchecked introspection and the narcissistic tendencies of a society. Teotihuacán, in this context, represents the chaotic and often brutal nature of self-knowledge. To look into his mirror is to confront the abyss of one's own psyche. The people of the city believed this would be purifying, but they were unprepared for the darkness they would find. The legend warns that a culture that becomes too obsessed with its own image, its own reflection, risks becoming paralyzed and ultimately consumed by it. The reflections coming to life symbolize the moment when our public personas, our curated selves, overwhelm, and destroy our authentic beings. It is a story about the terror of discovering that the monster you fear most is yourself. This ancient legend speaks with an eerie prescience to our modern, hypermediated world. We live in our own kind of obsidian city. Our screens, our phones, our computers, our televisions are the smoking mirrors of our age. We project curated images of ourselves and are constantly bombarded by the curated images of others. This endless cycle of reflection can lead to profound anxiety, depression, and a crisis of identity, a state of being trapped by the very image we have created. The ruins of Teotihuacán are said to be impossible to look at directly, as the obsidian still shows visitors their most terrifying potential selves. It is a place that forces us to ask, if you were pulled into your own reflection, would you be meeting a friend or a monster? For our final journey, we travel to the ultimate north, to the ice-choked shores of a land beyond myth, to a time before recorded time. Here, among the groaning glaciers and the unending twilight of the Arctic Circle, we find the remnants of the star-eaten city of Thule. This was not a city in the conventional sense, with walls and houses. It was a vast, sprawling complex of monolithic standing stones and precisely carved celestial calendars, a civilization whose architecture was the cosmos itself. Their story is not one of moral failure, but of intellectual overreach, a tale of cosmic horror. The people of this proto-civilization, whom we shall call the Thulians, were not priests who worshipped the stars, but astronomers and mathematicians who sought to map them with an obsessive, inhuman precision. They believed the universe was a great, intricate machine, and that if they could perfectly understand its gears and levers, the movements of the planets, the cycles of the comets, the precise location of every star, they could unlock the secrets of fate and achieve a form of immortality by aligning themselves with its cosmic architecture. Their city was a colossal orrery of granite and ice, designed to chart the heavens over millennia. The entity they encountered was not a god to be appeased, but a fundamental and predatory law of the universe they had failed to account for, an intelligence lurking in the dark spaces between the constellations. Their origin is lost to the ice ages, their language and culture known only through the silent geometry of their ruins. There were people who divorced knowledge from wisdom. They saw the cosmos as a puzzle to be solved, a text to be read, not as a place of terrifying, active powers. For centuries, perhaps thousands of years, they labored, hauling stones weighing hundreds of tons across the frozen landscape, carving them with calculations of terrifying complexity. Their ultimate goal was to complete their grand model of the universe on a single, specific night. A polar night when a celestial alignment, so rare it occurred only once every 100,000 years, would be visible in the sky, an alignment that their calculations told them was the master key to the entire cosmic equation. Imagine that final, frigid night. The aurora borealis hangs like a tattered, green shroud across the sky. The Thulian astronomers, clad in furs, move with quiet purpose in the bone-aching cold. The final, massive lintel stone, carved with the last set of equations, is levered into place atop two great monoliths, completing the final circuit of their stone computer. At the precise, calculated moment, the alignment occurs. A distant, unknown star, a pinprick of violet light, moves into perfect conjunction with a black nebula. As it does, the city awakens. Faint lines of phosphorescent energy, a cold, St. Elmo's fire, crackle across the stones, connecting the monoliths in a vast, web-like pattern that mirrors the constellations above. The Thulians look up, their faces filled with the triumph of ultimate achievement. They have solved the universe. But the sky they have opened is not the one they expected. The light from the violet star does not radiate warmth or wisdom. It is a hungry light. A beam of shimmering, visible darkness lances down and strikes the central altar. It does not illuminate, it absorbs. The Thulians feel a strange, pulling sensation, a gentle but irresistible unwinding of their physical forms. They look down at their hands to see them becoming translucent, their bodies dissolving into clouds of luminous particles that are drawn upward, spiraling into the cold, black lens that is opened in the heavens. There are no screams, only a collective, silent gasp of horrified understanding. They were not mapping the cosmos. They were writing a dinner invitation. The universe was not a machine to be understood, but an ecosystem, and they had just rung the bell for a predator that dwells in the void. When the alignment passed and the violet light faded, the city of stones stood perfect, silent, and utterly sterile, scoured clean of every trace of the biological life that had built it. The fate of the star-eaten city is a chilling tale of cosmic horror, a genre that frightens us not with ghosts or demons, but with the sheer scale and indifference of the universe. The Thulians were not punished for a moral sin like pride or decadence. Their flaw was intellectual hubris, the belief that knowledge equates to control. The legend is a stark metaphor for the potential dangers of scientific inquiry untempered by caution and humility. It taps into the deep-seated fear that in our quest to understand everything, we may stumble upon a truth that we are not equipped to handle, a piece of knowledge that is itself lethal. The predator from the stars is not evil. It is simply a force of nature operating on a scale we cannot comprehend, as indifferent to humanity as we are to the bacteria we eradicate with antiseptic. This ancient, invented legend feels profoundly modern. It is the story of the Manhattan Project, the splitting of the atom, unleashing a power that could consume the world. It is the fear surrounding the development of artificial general intelligence, the worry that we might create a mind so far beyond our own that it will see us as irrelevant or as a resource. The ruins of Thule, a place of perfect, silent stones under a cold and watchful sky, stand as a final, terrifying monument. They warn that the greatest threat may not come from the darkness within our own hearts, but from the vast, silent, and utterly alien darkness of the cosmos, and that some doors of knowledge, once opened, can never be closed again. Our long journey through these spectral landscapes now draws to its close. We have walked the phantom avenues of Iram, a city buried by its own pride. We have heard the ghostly bells of YS, drowned in a sea of its own indulgence. We have felt the paranoid gaze of the jungle from the unseen walls of Akakir, a city that kills with its secrets. We have stood in the unnerving quiet of Al-Samd, a civilization erased by its fear of expression. We have witnessed the divine fury that swallowed Heliki, a metropolis that forgot the meaning of humility. We have faced our own darkest potential in the endless mirrors of Teotihuacán, and we have felt the cold touch of the void among the silent stones of Thule. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from these chronicles of annihilation? What is the thread that binds these disparate dooms together? Each of these legends, in its own terrifying way, is a mirror held up not to the past, but to ourselves. They are not simply stories about fallen cities. They are complex, encoded warnings about the perennial human frailties that lead to collapse. They speak of the dangers of ambition untethered from morality, of freedom untempered by responsibility, of obsession that masquerades as truth, of purity that becomes a death cult, of faith that curdles into arrogance, of self-reflection that becomes self-consumption, and of knowledge that outpaces wisdom. These ruins, real and imagined, are the ghosts of potential futures. They're the specters of the worlds we might create if we allow our worst impulses to guide our hands. They teach us that civilization is a fragile construct, a constant, delicate negotiation between our aspirations and our limitations, between the order we build and the chaos that lurks both within and without. The greatest monuments we can build are not of stone or gold, but of humility, balance, and a profound respect for the mysteries we will never solve. They are the enduring proof that our demons are patient, and the abyss is always waiting. By bearing witness to these tales, you do more than simply entertain a morbid curiosity. You become a keeper of this ancestral wisdom, a guardian of the cautionary knowledge encoded in our darkest folklore. If you believe in the value of this exploration, then I urge you to subscribe to our channel, to share these stories with those who would understand, and to continue this dialogue in the comments. The act of remembering is the first and most crucial step in avoiding the same fate. The shadows of history are long, and the path forward is fraught with the echoes of these fallen worlds. I shall remain your faithful guide through them. Until our next descent, may your nights be filled with productive contemplation, and your dreams haunted by the truths that lie sleeping in the dust of forgotten realms. Remember that the best monsters are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. And know that the most haunting ghosts are not those of the dead, but of the worlds we failed to sustain. Look to the horizon and see in the ruins of the past the foundations of a wiser future.